Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is where you are. I want to welcome everyone to today's ATA webinar presentation, Talking the Talk, Tips for Giving a Conference Presentation That Rocks. Great title. I want to thank everyone for attending. My name is Mary David, and I am the webinar coordinator at ATA headquarters. First, I want to say a little bit about our speaker. She has gone to every conference that I can think of, and I joined ATA in 2001, and I see in her notes she had her first conference in 2002, so she's extremely qualified to give this presentation today. While we're waiting, again, for a few more attendees, I have a few housekeeping notes. Today's presentation is being recorded, so all of you will receive a link to the recording by email following the webinar, so you can go back and replay anything you want, fast forward, rewind. It's great. The webinar is scheduled for 60 minutes, but occasionally we go over. If you need to leave right on time, just do, and remember you'll have that recording so you can catch up later. All attendees are muted. This is the only way we can go forward without a lot of questions and slowing the whole presentation down. And please do ask questions. You have a question pane, question window on your screen. Just type in your question, and at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a question-answer period for whatever time we have. And what we don't get to, and more than likely we won't get to all of the questions, today's presenter, Jill Summer, will answer on her blog, Musings of an Overworked Translator. Again, another title. So, and with that, I do want to turn the webinar over to Jill.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. I see that most of you have probably already presented. Since this session is being recorded, I'm also going to be addressing people that have never presented before and maybe considering it for next year or future years. So when I cover topics like that, please bear with me. We aren't going to be going into too much detail, but I have to cover all my bases. Also, one of the tips for giving a conference presentation when you're doing a slideshow is to keep things really brief. Because this session is being recorded and I won't be able to answer questions for future people, I've written in full sentences, which is usually not customary, but I wanted other people to understand what I'm talking about. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time. Okay, let's get started. Okay, this is what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to go over how to write a conference proposal, give you some tips for organizing and writing your presentation, give you some ideas on how to prepare your presentation both before and before the conference, so like a week before and then before the presentation itself, 5 minutes in, how to present, what to do, what not to do, and then I'll talk a little bit about follow-up at the end. Okay, here are some tips on preparing a winning proposal. When I first started presenting in 2003, and my proposal managed to get some notice. So when you're doing a proposal, don't send any supplemental material. All they want is your abstract, a couple hundred words, and your information. So follow the instructions to the letter. Fill out everything in the proposal submission form. Polish your proposal. Write it, rewrite it. Make sure it fits within that couple hundred word requirement. And then focus on education. You're not there to push your services. You're there to educate conference attendees. So you have to figure out what you want to teach them. Also, give a little thought about your audience. Do you want to be giving this to new people, new beginners, intermediates, or everybody? And then tailor your proposal towards the audience. Make it relevant. If you know what people want, that it'll show. And then also submit your proposal on time. There are deadlines for a reason. They often get so many proposals and they have to decide on the best of the best, and by sending in a late proposal, you won't be considered among them. Okay, so you've got an idea. What do? You choose a topic that you're really enthused about, because if you're enthused, it's going to show in your presentation. Now, the deadline to submit a proposal is always in early March. They encourage you at the end of the conference to start thinking about proposals. So you can get the proposal form as early as January. It helps to think about what you want to do. And then you have to make the abstract interesting. The people that are making decisions about the proposal, they're usually the division administrators for whatever section that you're applying for. And you want to make your abstract stand out and make them think, wow, I really want to hear about this. I want to learn more about this. So it should be interesting. It should catch their attention. And so I've got the URL at the bottom to give you some ideas and more information about it. Okay, here's an ATA speaker checklist. Most of you have gotten this already, but I'm going to repeat it for those in the future. You have to register for the conference. Registration date is October 1st, and presenters get a percentage discount off. And then it's a good idea to provide session handouts, and nowadays they aren't in paper anymore, they're on the ATA app. The deadline for that is August 30th, so we've already passed that. You might want to submit a paper for the proceedings. The deadline for that is September 6th. What the proceedings does is it's printed ahead of the conference so that if people are trying to decide on sessions, what sessions they want to attend, they'll look at the abstract, and if they want to learn more about it, they'll look at the proceedings and read your paper. So you kind of have to give a lot of thought to your presentation ahead of time, because your paper and the proceedings would be the tipping point of whether people want to attend or not. Okay, today's deadline is for the ATA eConference. So if you want to submit your presentation for the eConference, you have to submit the form now. And the opt-out form is also due today, so maybe they might want to ask Mary more information about this at the end of the presentation. Okay, what is the ATA eConference, you ask? Every presentation at the ATA conference is recorded unless the speaker decides that they don't want to be recorded for whatever reason. And the primary contact is the person who has submitted the proposal and is the first name on the presentation. So, for example, Corinne McKay and I are presenting the first-time attendees conference session at the upcoming conference. I'm considered the primary contact because my name comes first, and I've been doing it for a while. So if you're a secondary contact and you want to pre-order the eConference, you might want to talk to your primary contact. And you can order the eConference DVD at 50% off. And that is for people who are actually participating. So if your session is, you don't want it recorded, you won't get the discount. Okay, one important tip is use your microphone, because you are being recorded for the eConference. So everything that you say is being recorded, and that bears in mind your attendees do not have a microphone, and so when they're asking questions, it's nice to either give them the microphone or repeat their question so that people that are listening to the recording can follow along and actually understand what you're talking about. When you're doing your session, you might want to consider using your mouse if you're going to point something out instead of a laser pointer, because the people in the eConference can't see what you're pointing onto the screen with the laser pointer. Really technical tip, for the best results for your laptop, set your screen resolution to 1024 by 768. I know that's a techie detail, but it's an important one. Okay. When you submit your proposal, ATA asks what AV options you want. What do you need for your presentation? So you have to give that some thought when you're submitting the proposal. So they offer you an LCD projector, and so you have the cord, so you can hook up your laptop onto the LCD projector so you can show your laptop to your attendees. ATA does not provide laptops. You have to bring your own laptop. They provide PC audio, so if you have any questions, the texts that are there to record it, they'll show up ahead of time and they'll go through things with you. So if you need to amplify your sound, you can request PC audio. I like to have a flip chart so that I'm writing things down. It may not be good for the eConference, but this way it's an easy way to stress a certain URL that comes in mind that you hadn't thought about, or anything like that you want to share with your attendees. And ATA also provides microphones based on the number of speakers. They'll either be a stand or they'll be a wireless microphone that you clip to your shirt. That's also really important because I've been to presentations where microphones are clipped way down low. Try to keep it as close to your mouth as possible so that the recording gets everything you're saying, but try not to put it where it's going to brush up against clothing, because that brushing is going to be recorded as well, and it might actually override what you're saying, so people won't be able to hear you. So really be careful where you're placing your mic. Okay, so I've already said that ATA doesn't provide laptops. You need to have a VGA cable port on your laptop. Most laptops nowadays have them, so that shouldn't be an issue. If you're working with a really old laptop, you might want to consider going to Best Buy or H.H. Gregg or another electronics store to show them and tell them that you need an adapter for a VGA cable. If you have a Mac, netbook, or other laptop that without a port, you need to bring your adapter. ATA will not provide it. Okay, another thing that ATA does not provide. ATA does not offer internet access in the rooms itself. So if you're thinking about doing a presentation and you absolutely need internet, you might want to consider tethering your phone to your laptop and hope that your service provider offers this feature. Don't walk in there expecting that you're going to be using the internet and you're not going to be able to. I had to suffer with this when I was giving a presentation on internet research. We had to come up with a solution with screenshots instead of actually going on the internet and showing people how we Googled things or looked up terms. So when you're doing your presentation, don't consider internet access as being a given. Okay, so you want to think about how you want to present your idea. There are certain audiovisual tools like PowerPoint or Prezi, and you need to make them interesting. I haven't used any bells or whistles on this presentation because I didn't want to detract from my presentation itself. I will go into Prezi in a second because you're probably asking what Prezi is, so bear with me. Also, choose a presentation style that fits you. I've been to presentations where people are standing right at the podium because they're nervous as heck and their knees are knocking. I've been to presentations where the people walk around using their wireless mic, and I've been to panel presentations. So consider which style you want to use to best benefit your audience. Also, do not ever, ever, ever read off a paper. I've been to presentations where the person has not looked up from their paper and they're just reading it off. I get that you're nervous, but don't do that. It's boring for your audience. You're not going to get their attention that way. I already talked about flip charts. Okay, so what's Prezi? It's a cloud-based presentation software. So if we do not have internet access, you're probably not going to be able to use it, but I wanted to discuss it just in case you wanted to use it with tethering. I learned about this when Michael Valster gave a presentation at the Translation Company Division mid-year conference. It was fantastic. What it is, it's one file, and all the text is in certain locations on that one file, and it zooms around. It's really cool. So if you want to learn more about that, you can look at it at www.prezi.com. It wowed everybody in the room. Okay, most people, however, use PowerPoint. When it comes to slides, less is more. Not in this case, but you don't want to overwhelm your people with a whole bunch of slides. And you certainly don't want to run through like a ton of slides in a brief period of time. So one good rule of thumb is 1 slide per minute. In my case today, I have 45 slides, and some of them are fillers, and some of them I'll probably go into a little bit more detail. But that's your good rule of thumb. So it's a good idea to maybe do about 40 slides and then plan for question and answer afterwards. those are for the 1-hour presentations. Okay, when you're doing your slides, give your presentation a little structure. So in this case, I talked about the agenda, I talked about the proposal, and preparing the proposal, or preparing the presentation, and then the presentation itself. So I did a little outline and gave it some structure, and then I built around that. If you use transitions, and what that is when you're flipping through and every sentence shows up in a different way. So it'll fly in from the screen or it'll drop down. Try not to use them very often, but if you do, limit them to 1 or 2 styles, because if you have 4 or 5 different styles, each sentence coming in a different way, that's just irritating. And then you might want to keep things light and add a cartoon or two. Little graphics are always fun, like my little dude at the beginning of my presentation with the loudspeaker. So it just lightens things up a little bit and shows that you're not as serious. You know, I guess it depends on what the presentation is that you're doing, but it's always nice to add a little levity. Okay, when you're doing your PowerPoint, pick one style and use it consistently. So do a template and then keep going. So if you're using bullet points, just keep using bullet points. Don't do something different in the middle. Think about your font size. It should be no smaller than 18 points and no larger than 36 points. Anything smaller than 18 points you can't read. Anything larger than 36 points is just obnoxious. Try to keep your font types limited to just a couple. You don't want to overdo it with like Comic Sans and Times Roman and Calibri and all these other different kinds. It's confusing and it's not very good for the audience. Make sure that your audience can read your graphics and your charts. So if you have a cartoon, make it big enough so that people can read it on the screen. And you don't want to overwhelm people. Like, you don't want to have more than one on a slide, and you don't want every single slide to have graphics. And then make sure that the graphics have some kind of connection to what you're saying. Don't just throw a graphic on there because it looks cool. Make sure that it's underscoring your point. Okay, when you're preparing your presentation, you've written your proposal, you know what your idea is, and you want to focus on that. You don't want to cram too much information into a presentation. Focus on one point that you go into in detail. And then you want to have like 3 to 5 takeaway points that you want the audience to remember. And so you'll repeat those as you go through the presentation. So if you're talking about, I don't know, German grammar structure, you know, think about your takeaway points that you're going to repeat throughout the presentation. Also, people remember images, stories, emotions, and real-life comparison. I will show you an example. When I first started out talking or presenting at the conference, the first time I submitted a proposal, it was rejected. And I knew that the demand was there because I had people on the listservs asking about web design. And I knew that web design was important. And so after it got rejected, I actually wrote the president of ATA at the time, Scott Brennan, and I convinced him to give me a shot, and it got scheduled for the last session of the day. And I think they were still a little skeptical that people didn't want it. But I was confident that people needed it, and it was in a tiny room on the last session of the day on Saturday, and it was packed. So if you know in your heart that your information is good, you know, stick with it and push for it. And I bet you're going to remember that story at the end of this presentation. Okay, you want to write for oral delivery because you want to underscore things in your head as to what you want to say. So you're going to use short sentences, strong verbs, not as much jargon unless there's a bunch of people and it's the advanced audience. And then you want to keep things concise. You don't want to go into a lot of detail. And repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay. Try to speak from memory as much as possible. And when you're going along, underline key terms in your speech as to what you want to say. Know how long you your presentation should be and plan accordingly. So if you know that you're going to have an hour presentation and you need 10 to 15 minutes to answer questions, plan ahead and plan your slides to fit the hours. If you have a couple hours, you can plan a different way. And the best presenters know how much time they have, and they keep an eye on the time. I've been to plenty of presentations where people are looking at their watch and they're getting antsy because they want to go, and the presenter is just droning on and on and on. And also, if you are running out of time, stop. Do not just, maybe jump ahead if there's one last point you want to make, and you want to think about this ahead of time. If I run out of time, what do I absolutely have to say and prepare in order to jump? You have to leave time for questions and then announce that at the beginning of the presentation, because people are going to try to bog you down, and that is just annoying. If people are asking questions in the middle of your presentation, that's going to derail your thought process. That's going to irritate the audience because it may not be of interest for your audience. And if it's specific for them, then that's something that needs to be followed up afterwards. Okay. When you're doing your presentation, know what your point is. Think about who your audience is, why they're there, what motivates them, what can you do for them, what language do they best understand. So you need to figure out if you want to do it in English or your B or A language. How can you best reach your audience? Ask yourself what your job is. Are you trying to teach them? Are you trying to just share information with them? Ask yourself what you want from your audience and what some obstacles might be in order to do that. So if you think about that kind of thing, you can come up with an idea of what you want to say and how you want to convey it, and it helps you build a rapport with your audience. And just, if you think about what you're actually trying to convey, and you'll be fine. But you can easily go off on a tangent. Okay, when you're giving a presentation, avoid self-talk at all points, at all times. And what that means is, I've done this. I did this in my word count presentation. We were having problems with the technology, and I got upset with it, and I was muttering, why isn't this working? You want to avoid that. You don't want your audience to realize something might be wrong. You don't want to point out spelling mistakes or extra slides or things like that, because that undermines your credibility and it makes you look like you don't know what you're talking about. If you make a mistake, simply note it to yourself to fix it and then move on, because self-talking detracts from what you're trying to say to your audience. Also, this talk is not about you. It's about your audience. So wear your information, wear your knowledge lightly, and think of yourself as a conduit of the information and not, hey, I'm the greatest and I'm going to push this and this is me. You want to give your audience knowledge. It's not about you. Okay, understand your audience a little bit more. Plan accordingly. Don't assume that they know what you're talking about. Don't assume that everybody knows how to internet research. You need to talk to the lowest common denominator. If you think you need to explain fundamental concepts, don't talk down and just explain it to them. And also, if you have, you're going to have a range of knowledge in the room. It's just going to be a fact. And if you're going to go into some background, do it quickly and then move on. If you set your presentation for intermediate and there's some new people in the audience, new beginners, and you specified that it's for an intermediate, don't take the time to explain how Google is. I went to one presentation about internet research skills and somebody interrupted the presentation, what's Google? And that just threw the entire presentation off and just made me get up and walk out. So, if you know ahead of time what your audience is and what you want to focus on, you can't focus on the new people if it's for intermediate or advanced people. Another key point is when you're giving a presentation is talk about what you know. Don't talk about something that you know nothing about because it shows. And a great presenter knows what points they're going to make, but they also know why it's important and what they mean. That's why my internet research presentation was so well received, because I was passionate about it. I knew what I was talking about, and I knew how important it was that people learn how to make a website. Okay, tell stories. Again, like I said, my story you're going to remember. So make a point and then put it into a real situation. Explain exactly why. So like in my example with Google, you know, people are going to remember your stories more than necessarily your points. And, you know, some of the stories that you might want to talk about, it might be something you've experienced, something that one of your friends has experienced. So like a friend complaining about a session might keep you in mind. Or your opinion about something, because most of us are very opinionated. So, you know, your audience is going to listen to you and understand your point better with stories. Okay, inverted pyramid is something that I learned about when I was looking into this a little bit more. It's a style of writing where you present the most important facts first and then elaborate on them. So you get your point across and then you add on it. So in this case, we're going to talk about presentations and then, you know, all these different things that I'm adding on to. If you build up your point slowly, people are going to get bored and chances are they're going to walk out. So you want to start right at the beginning with your point and then build on it. You don't want to like bring it up 20 minutes into the presentation. Also, you want to make sure it flows naturally. So in my case, I thought about the proposal, you know, preparations, writing it, and then we're going to talk about presenting tips. So make sure that it flows naturally and so that people can follow where you're going and how it relates to the whole overall presentation. One thing very important, rehearse. So take notes. Like in my case, I've got notes in my hand and I've got key points underlined that I want to bring up. If you're rehearsing, you are hearing what you're saying, and you're not going to come up with some stupid phrase. Well, you might still come up with a stupid phrase, but you're allowed to laugh that off. And you can practice your jokes and your stories and figure out what's going to work and what isn't. And if you're speaking it aloud, you know, you're going to see where the problems are and where the flaws are. And then when you're rehearsing, you can also, you know, see how your transitions are working. You can practice your eye contact and how fast you're talking. When I present, I constantly have to remind myself to slow down because I get nervous and I talk too fast. Rehearsing makes you not as nervous because you've already done it a couple times. Okay, a couple tips before the conference. And if you're following the handouts, I did this slide on purpose. You need to finalize your presentation before the conference, not the night before your presentation. Don't stay up all night until 2 in the morning working on your presentation, because you've submitted handouts and your audience is going to get irritated because the presentation somehow veers off from the handout. Also, you want to upload your presentation to your website or some other sharing site that you can give your attendees the URL. And that's because everybody likes to have the presentation in their hands, and after the presentation they want to be able to look back and look something up or read it again. And then before you leave for the conference, make sure that you have everything you need. I can't tell you how many times I have gotten to the conference and realized that A, I didn't have my laser pointer with me, I left it at home, or, you know, I get to the presentation and I realize that the batteries aren't working in the laser pointer. And I have like a little laser pointer / remote control where I can flip between pages on the presentation. So, you know, if you need to have like little handouts, or if you need like little, I don't know, in my case when I do the first time attendees presentation, I make sure that, well, I used to make sure that I would bring the resume stand that I brought and any kind of, you know, show and tell kind of thing. You make sure that it's all packed in your luggage before the conference. Okay, another thing you might want to consider. Schedule a hair appointment with your barber or your stylist right before the conference. And it's a week before the conference is a good idea, because then if you get it cut too short, you know, you can fix that. You want to think about what you're going to wear. You should be wearing comfortable clothing. Make sure it isn't too tight or too flashy. Make sure your shoes are classy and well cared for. Even if you're standing behind a podium, people notice shoes. Also look critically at your hands and nails, because everybody else does. Your audience typically devotes 55% of their attention to your visual appearance, so give it some thought ahead of time. Okay, before the actual presentation itself, there are some things that you can do beforehand to ensure a good basic voice tone. The night of your speech, the night before your speech, get a good night's sleep and be well rested. So in my case, I went to bed at like midnight last night, and that's unusual for me, because I wanted to be well rested so that my brain was working, and then I also made sure I had some coffee. Okay, drink sufficient liquids to strengthen your body. Make sure that you're well hydrated, because lots of water makes your brain work better. Do not drink milk before a public speaking appearance. The fat in milk can gum up your vocal cords. As I clear my throat. Get some exercise. It'll improve your posture. Also, exercising your voice the days before your appearance, and I'm going to go through a couple vocal exercises in a little bit. Okay. One way to exercise your voice, you might want to sing out loud, like in the shower or in the car. You might want to read aloud and insert stress markers in your text, and you want to loosen your jaw like a couple days before the conference. So, before the presentation, practice your presentation. Go over it one more time aloud if possible, at least one more time. Remember Martin Luther's advice to speakers: Tritt fest auf, mach's mal auf, hör bald auf. Translated, that means take a firm stand, speak clearly, and be brief. So you want to visualize your speech as a journey. Ask yourself what your goal is, what the road signs are, who your audience is, and then memorize your road signs one more time. So like the main points that you want to do, and you have to keep those in your mind, are your road signs. So I'm thinking about the proposal, I'm thinking about how to write the presentation, tips on presenting before the proposal or presentation, and then during the presentation. Those are my road signs. Also, before the presentation, stop drinking a lot of liquids a few hours before your appearance so that you don't have to run to the restroom. Also, before your presentation, make sure you run to the restroom so you don't have to stop in the middle of it. 5 minutes before you start, you might want to loosen your pivot points, and I will go into that in a few minutes, a little bit more detail. And also, breathe out hard several times in quick succession to make room in your lung for fresh air. And you're going to want to loosen your lower jaw, like open it up and move it around a little bit. Also, look forward to the situation. Look forward to reaching out to your audience. That will make you enthusiastic and make you look more enthusiastic. Okay, so you're asking, what are pivot points? Well, there's some breathing exercises that help you loosen things up. So if you clear out your lungs to make room for fresh air, you fold your hands in front of your chest and breathe out in 6 short bursts. That stimulates abdominal breathing and will flush your lungs out. And it will also loosen your diaphragm, which releases tension and makes your voice sound better. You're going to want to stretch your arms out forward and move them around in a horizontal quarter circle as you breathe in, and then back as you breathe out. And you do that about 6 times. Start with your arms at your side. Turn both of them up in a lateral vertical semicircle skyward as you breathe in, then bring them down again into a hanging position. And basically throw your arms around and loosen up everything. You want to loosen up your shoulders. You want to loosen up your elbows and your hands and your chest. And you want to loosen up your hips. You're going to want to swing your hips a little bit. And, rotate your knees and feet. Shake your arms, shake your legs, and that'll loosen you up. Because you've seen people that are preparing for things. They jump up and down and they, throw things around, and that's going to loosen you up a lot more. And that stimulates abdominal breathing. Now, one other way to stimulate abdominal breathing, which you're going to kind of look goofy for at the conference, but it's something that people do, is you lie down on your back and lay your hands flat on your stomach, and then you breathe deeply in and out. So you focus on your belly rising and receding and how far you can make it go up and down. And you know, you might want to do that behind the table. You know, think about it as a meditation rule. As a general rule, the better that your abdominal muscles are trained, the better your abdominal breathing will be, and the less likely you will be to suffer from shortness of breath. So some more things for the jaw. Yawn, make some chewing motions, press your lips together and release them. Push your jaw back and forth and sideways. Tilt your neck to one side, let it drop down, pull it up to the other side, and repeat. And you know, do a slow swinging motion over your head. That'll loosen your neck up as well. Alternate lifting and lowering your shoulders. Move them in circles. Breathe up and down in your chest. Use your arms to accentuate the motion. Twist your hands around your wrist. Let your fingers dance. Rock from side to side to loosen up your hips. Do maybe a hula hoop motion. Draw a figure eight, horizontal figure eight with your hips. And if you perform these exercises standing or sitting, it's going to relax you. You're going to look like an idiot, but you know, it will relax you and that will help. So I went into way too much detail for you guys, but you know, it's important to loosen yourself up before a presentation, because if you get too tense, you're going to sound breathy and it's not going to go over very well. Okay, prepare for technical disaster. I was at one conference and one of the presenters had their laptop and they were walking into the room and they dropped the laptop and broke it. So plan ahead. You know, arrive early, make sure that everything's working, all the microphones are working, that your laptop is showing up on the screen. Have a backup on your flash drive. And even if you have, you know, the laptop and your flash drive, you might want to consider, you know, a second flash drive just in case. It's better to have too many backups than showing up and not having anything and having to cancel your presentation. And also, if you get there like right before the presentation and your screen isn't showing on your laptop on the LCD projector, you're going to get flustered. And you know, starting 15 minutes late doesn't make it look good. And you want to make sure everything runs smoothly and you're prepared ahead of time. Okay, that's enough about little presentation tips. Now I'm going to talk about the presentation itself. At the start of your presentation, make sure you can tell people where your handouts are. Either have them on your website or on the ATA mobile app. And I think that's a great thing, having it on the mobile app, because you have it on your phone, so you have it in your hand and it's saving paper. Also, at the beginning of a presentation, make sure people quiet their cell phones. There's nothing more annoying for an audience member than somebody else having their phone ring. And I'm guilty of this. I went to the restroom and I got back and my friend said, "Oh man, you really missed it. Somebody's phone was ringing during a presentation." And then my phone kind of chimed and she said, "Yeah, kind of like that. It was a really annoying song." I was like, "Oh yeah, that was me." So make sure that people have set your phones to vibrate and quiet. At the beginning of the presentation, give them a short description of your session. Remind the attendees what level you are. So if they're at an intermediate or an advanced session and they don't know what Google is, you know, you might want to let them know that this might be a little over their heads and they might want to go somewhere else. Also, let people know what language you're going to be giving it in, because that's kind of important. And I know that a lot of people go to sessions that are in different languages than what they work in, just to learn more things. So, you know, let people know ahead of time what the language is going to be. And then don't change the language in the middle, and just if you said in the session that you're going to do it in English, do it in English. Start the session off with the agenda. Let them know what you're going to be covering, so that they can decide if they want to stay or not. And hopefully they've read the proposal and they've read the paper and the proceedings and they know that they want to stay. Also, the agenda kind of gives them a heads up as to what what they can expect. So they don't want to sit through a presentation that's droning on and wondering, when is this ever going to end? So if you show them an agenda at the beginning, they're going to know. Okay, during the presentation, and I'm going to read this word for word off my slide. Do not read word for word off your slide. People can read, and if it's on the presentation, the better presenters actually paraphrase what they're going to say or come up with a different way of saying it. They don't read word for word off the slide. Because if you're reading every single word, your audience members are going to get irritated with you, saying, well, I can read just as easily. Why am I even here? You don't want to have a script. You want to try to speak from memory. That makes it a little freer, but as long as you have your roadsides written out and you've got your notes, you should be okay. So you don't want to have a speech where you're reading it, because I've been German speakers. When I lived in Germany, they're especially famous for this. They'll read off their paper word for word in a monotone, and it's boring for the audience. So, try to speak from memory, liven things up a little bit. Paraphrase things that are on the slides, have an extra story on the side or a little extra bonus that you want to talk about, and, go into a little bit more detail, because PowerPoint presentations really should be only bullet points anyways. So you want to show them the bullet point, and then you want to expand on that. Also, you want to keep reminding yourself during the presentation to speak slowly and clearly. There's a couple ways to do this. If you tend to speak too quickly, start using the consonant break. And what that is you make a point of precisely pronouncing each consonant. And that will slow you down, because if you are enunciating every single consonant, you're going to speak slower, and people are going to actually understand you better. You want to make each vowel resonate. So Germans are real good at rolling their R's. So, just focus on the words that you're trying to say. Don't mumble. Whatever you do, do not mumble. Your audience, you want them to understand you, and if you're mumbling, that's not going to work. If so, if you do mumble, use the vowel gate and make each vowel resonant. So if you mumble, focus on the vowels. If you speak too quickly, focus on the consonants. Okay, during the presentation, picture your voice as a musical instrument. Raise and lower the volume, just as you would when playing music, or color its sound dark or bright. Speed up your tempo or slow it down. Or you can fall silent, because a pause generates a suspension and attention. Because if I'm suddenly pausing, people are going to want to know what you're trying to say. So also, your voice is a wind instrument, and make sure that you've supplied it with lots of air. Breathe in all the way down to your belly. Think about your body language. Are you smiling? Are you facing your audience? Are you making eye contact? If you're shyer, focus on one or two people in the audience. Don't keep looking around the audience the whole time. Your body speaks volumes. Are you refreshed? Are you fit? Are you alert? Are you ready to engage with the audience? Or are people going to notice that you're tense and nervous? You're focused on your muscle tone, your posture, your gaze, and your gestures, because they're focusing on that too. Okay, once again, we said don't allow questions during the presentation. It will just irritate your audience. And then if people have questions that you can't answer, have them come up to you after the presentation and talk to you, or, have them write you an email, and then you can expand on it in the blog or in email. If these are questions that doesn't interest the entire audience, don't entertain them. So also, your foremost objective is delivering the message, not entertaining. So you don't want to be a total jokester. You want to focus on your message. And if the content of your presentation has people walking out excited, then you've had a successful presentation. And I always tell my first-time attendees, if you go to the conference and you have had one or two successful presentations, then the conference is a success. So your presentation helps them make enjoy a better conference. Okay, so when you're wrapping things up at the end, like we're going to be doing in a few minutes, ask somebody to tell you when you have some time left. You know, you have one of your friends sit in the front and looking at a clock, kind of like how Mary does it during the election speeches. You know, have people, let somebody, have someone tell you when you're running out of time. Also, your last slide should thank your audience for their attention and offer some contact information about how to contact you and possibly where they can see the presentation or the PowerPoint presentation for themselves. And then keep your last slide visible. Don't just shut your computer down at the end of your presentation. This allows people to write your information down. Also, at the ATA, there's always feedback forms. I think nowadays they're doing it in the mobile app itself. And at the end of your presentation, encourage your attendees to fill out the application or the feedback form and let ATA know how you did. Okay, so also if you're doing a Q&A session, like I said before, if your audience does not have a microphone, repeat the question. If there's a question that you're not prepared to answer or you don't know the answer to, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know, let me look into that. Don't just bluff your way through it. And I really like question and answer sessions because it gives me ideas on what I might want to build on in the future. So every question and answer session for my first time attendees presentation, the answers get built into my subsequent presentations. So, you know, you can always improve. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, you can do it during the question and answer, or you can contact me at the information on the slide. And Musings from an Overworked Translator is at translationmusings.com. Like Mary said, I will be answering questions there as well.
Okay, thanks, Jill. I want to ask a few questions now. We don't have that many, so please do use that question box and give us some questions because everybody benefits from that. I've had a couple of questions about the deadline for the handouts. It was extended to September 20th, so you have a little bit more time. I've also had a couple of questions about opting in or opting out of the eConference. You are automatically opted in. There's a form on the ATA website on the speaker checklist, which I'm going to send all of you that link. You should have gotten it at some point, but I'll send it to you again. There's a form there for you to opt out. So we tried to opt in. Everybody decided to opt in, and then no one did, and then they got on site, and they said, oh, but I wanted it. So we're just opting you in, and people can opt out. There's always the last ditch. If you're at the conference, you really don't want it. You can find Teresa Kelly and say, I don't want to be on the eConference. That's not ideal, obviously. Okay, so how much time will we actually have to set up? Jill, I think this question is for me, but you can confirm about the setup time since you've spoken so many times before. Hadassah is asking, will there be 30 minutes between presentations in the same rooms? Yes, the schedule's built. We used to have 15-minute breaks, but now we have 30. So you should have enough time. Will technical assistance be available? Yes, we do have technical assistance on site. Do I need to bring my own markers? Is there a flip chart or a whiteboard? It's a flip chart. I'd bring my own markers. This goes back to what Jill has said about being prepared and having a backup. I'm not sure. I think the markers are there, but please don't trust me. Just bring them.
Usually the markers are there, but it's a better idea just to have your own just in case that maybe the ink was run out or it's dried or whatever.
Thanks. Okay. And the presentation breaks 30 minutes, Jill. Does that give you enough time to set up?
Oh, absolutely. If everything's working smoothly, you can set up within 5 minutes. If things aren't working smoothly, it might take the techs 10 to 15 minutes to figure out the problem.
Okay, this one might be for you, Jill. And as internet is not available for presentations, is it very bad to use some print screens during the presentation?
No, absolutely not, because it shows people what the screen's going to look like. Maybe I don't understand the question. I usually, when I didn't have the internet, I made screenshots of the search engine page that I was using to illustrate my point and to show people what the screen's going to look like. I think that's what the question is. If it's not, please let me know.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Since we already submitted our paper, can we make slight changes to the PowerPoint to make it more fun? I think that's perfectly fine. What do you think, Jill?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and you're going to see, we've all been to presentations where we've gone and it's supposed to have been one thing, it's something else completely. So that's a little irritating. If you're making minor tweaks that might not be noticeable, that's fine. And you know, you can change your presentation to, you know, an hour before the presentation if you come up with something. Just don't expect that people are going to be able to get that, so you might want to add that on the flip chart. If you've added something, you know, make sure that the audience has some way of, you know, writing it down.
Okay. I also wanted to remind everyone that if you've submitted your handout by September 20th, it should be on the conference app. So people should be able to see it from their desktop, their netbook, their laptop, their mobile phone. It covers all of the devices that you can think of out there. So please do get that handout in. We're not printing anything unless it's absolutely necessary. For example, if someone was doing a translation on site and they were having their audience do the translation with a piece of paper in front of them, that we would print, but nothing else. And you know, it's not just going green, it's a matter of paper. People trash the stuff, we end up trashing what's left over, or the speaker, you know, has to lug it home. So it really does make sense. I know some people still like that paper. I can appreciate that. Since it's going to be on the conference app, print it out at home before you come, or go to the business office on site. That's a little more expensive, but it's doable. For submitting our PowerPoint presentation. Today is the deadline for eConference opt-out form, but not for submitting our PowerPoint presentation. Am I correct? I'm not sure, Jill. I'm not sure what is meant by the submitting the PowerPoint presentation.
No, you're not going to be submitting your presentation. They're going to be recording it as you're going. Am I right?
You are right. You are right. You will actually see a video camera in the room. They're not videotaping you so that it'll be on the eConference. They're videotaping so that they will be able to sync your voice later to the recording. It's a process, and ATA obviously contracts this out. But don't worry about being, the right hand movements or anything else, because you're being videotaped. And that goes on to another question. Someone was asking about, I think it's Pablo, asking about dress code, or how would you, what should the speaker really be concerned about wearing?
No dress code. I say business casual. I mean, there are some people that come in a suit and tie, and I usually wear a blouse and slacks, or a blouse and a skirt or whatever. You don't want to look sloppy, but you don't have to wear like a three-piece suit or a dress or anything like that. Wear something that makes you comfortable, but don't do your presentation in yoga pants.
Good idea. Although I did want to mention, when you were talking about all of the ways to warm up, that we do have yoga at 6 or 6:30 in the morning.
And Zumba.
Oh yeah, I forgot. They're doing Zumba. It's going to be an exciting conference, guys. I know that I'm an ATA staffer, so obviously I'm going to say that, but I think it really will be. We're doing different things. Let's see. More the camera, yes. Today is the day. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read because I couldn't get all the questions at the same time. How many people do we expect in the audience? And this varies. I think Jill might want to add something there. It's really unpredictable.
It is very unpredictable. Like I said, my first presentation was in 2003, and it was in the tiniest room that they could possibly give me. And people were sitting on the table in the back and sitting on the floor. And then, it could be, I've all of a sudden been presenting to the ballroom. So your presentation could be in the grand ballroom. You could expect 30 people. it depends on how specialized your presentation is. And if you're presenting on something that interests people, like I did internet security and internet privacy, and we regularly filled out the ballroom. And I was made no longer the presenter. You can't hear me anymore.
Yes, we can hear you. Don't
Okay.
worry.
So yeah, I mean, kind of figure out how specialized your presentation is, and then plan accordingly. But you know, it could be anywhere from like 10 people to 100.
I did have one last question before I do a few closing slides about upcoming events. Could you repeat the screen resolution that you gave earlier?
I think it was 1024 by 768.
And remember that you can play this webinar over because you're going to have a link to the recording. And we are going to, I believe, Jill, send out the actual slides as a PDF file. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. And remember, Jill has her
presentation before I made the change to that one slide, just to irritate you guys.
Okay, one last lesson, right? I want to thank Jill again for presenting and all of you for attending. I wanted to point out that we now have a Pinterest page for the annual conference. It's been really cool to work on this. I hope all of you will look for ATA on the Pinterest site. If you don't know about Pinterest, you're going to love it. It's just really cool. I wanted to also talk about next week's webinar. Tom West is going to be presenting on translating contracts to and from French. And if you know anything about Tom West, you know he's an excellent presenter and so knowledgeable. He's one of those lawyer linguists who's certified in 5 languages. So, but he's not proud about it. He's really humble. So it'll be a great webinar. Then our last webinar for the year will be October 18th. It's specifically for interpreters, and it's note-taking for interpreters, which if you're an interpreter, you know how important that can be. I didn't know anything about it until I read the proposal, so it sounds like a really interesting webinar from the outside looking in. And we have a new blog. It's The Savvy Newcomer, and I hope some of you will go there even if you're not a newcomer so that you can comment on some of the newcomer questions. We do have posts, one a week, that deal with specific issues, but we are getting some comments, and it always helps to have someone who's been there make comments. I can't remember. Let's see, this week it was she's got a low-paying client. Yeah, Jill, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, you actually have commented on the board, and you've been on there. Can you just say how the blog is going?
It's going really well, and the more people that learn about it, the more people are going to be commenting and things. The whole point of this newbies and buddies is to make first-time attendees actually have a buddy ahead of time so that they have someone to hang out with. And the Savvy Newcomer is kind of focusing on what the newbies need. And it's helpful for people that are commenting that have been in the business for a while. Like one of the latest posts was one of my reprints from my blog. And it's offering new people, tips on, business cards or, how do I market myself. And the more people that are commenting, the more beneficial it's going to be.
I think it's really a long time coming, and it's great for ATA to be able to support new professionals. If you remember, they got to be a professional, learn how to be a professional. People don't come into this industry understanding all of that. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. Remind you that you can find all the ATA webinars. We have a recording library of more than 35 webinars at www.atanet.org/webinars. And if you need anything, please send me an email, mary@atanet.org. So with that, we'll close out the webinar. I wish everyone a great day and a great weekend. Thanks for attending.